Okay, welcome back, everybody. Okay, we've got Cathy Tait-Jamieson and Katrina Wolff here to talk about biodynamics, Biodynamic New Zealand, and the sharing of biodynamics.
Kia ora, everybody, whoever's out there in the room.
Hello, hello. Thank you all for coming. And we've had a last minute apology from Brian E. Rogers, who is planning to come and speak on behalf of the Biodynamic Association about our upcoming conference. So in lieu of that, I am going to just keep on dropping into the chat the website for the Biodynamic Association. And if you have the headspace to click on a link and open up a tab while we're talking, then you can look at the website and see the dates and the speakers and the times and the costs and all the details for the conference. It's in 2 weeks' time. And I'm really excited about the theme of this year's conference, Biodynamics and You. But Cathy, how would you feel about talking first? Because I'm waiting for someone else to hop into the participant list, and if he comes, I'm going to pop him in as well. So I'd like to hand over to Cathy, and just by way of very brief introduction, I've been studying Huapara Kore for a year and a bit, and Cathy is one of the superstars in the Huapara Kore world. You're the first one to be verified Huapara Kore, I understand, with BioFarm. And every time I see BioFarm yogurt in the supermarket and I have it in my fridge, it's like, yes! Just so proud of your work. So as one of the speakers at the conference, perhaps you'd like to share a little bit about your story and what people can expect when they come and hear you and meet you in person. Thanks.
Okay, kia ora. Thank you, Katrina. I'll just start off with a little karakia. That's okay. Yep. Te pū, te more, te weu, te aka, te rea, te wao, te ku, te whē, te kore, te pō. Nā rangi rawa ko papa, ko ngā tangata Māori, ko tēnei te tīmatanga o te ao. Kia ora. So thanks everybody for this opportunity to be part of Organic Week in support of New Zealand Organic Week. The whole kaupapa of having a group of like-minded, passionate people coming together in various forums throughout Aotearoa really has given a sense of excitement. Just the Facebook posts that pop up and the odd article and the awards night that we could all be part of on Facebook was just incredible. And congratulations to everyone that persevered through all the struggles to get that all up and running. And we're here today. So I've got some notes here, and I have to say that in preparation for today, I started preparing for the conference. So thank you, Organic Week. Another reason that I'm really grateful to be here. And I realized that I haven't thought about our story for quite a long time. So it is a long time in its development. So I thought today I'd just run through the BioFarm story. Yes, so first and foremost, I'm so proud of being an organic practitioner. You know, I fly the flag in my life, and everybody knows that, they can't talk about Roundup or GE in front of me. But I'm even more proud to be part of Te Waka Kaiora whānau, because this gives me inspiration and challenges me to not only do the best and what is right for me, our whenua, my whānau, but about future generations. So it puts it more into perspective about what I do every day. So Jamie and I were both born in the 1950s. We were both brought up on farms, and we both had a home in Palmerston North. I met Jamie in the early 1970s. He was a long-haired musician, playing gigs around New Zealand with musicians that you might have heard of: Billy TK and Powerhouse, Mahia Blackmore, Graham Sate, Kerry Jacobson from Dragon, Blurter, Mammal, a lot of buses, a lot of art, a lot of tapestry and thong jandals. So he had a private school background, he had a university degree, and he had a questioning mind, questioning the attitude of social norms. I was a local rural girl who my first job was a secretary at Glaxo Laboratories. Today I'd call it a PA. I was secretary to the human resource manager and then the marketing manager. And I moved from there to becoming a secretary to a solicitor and then a barrister. My big social engagements were uptown on Friday night, school balls and Bible class camps. So stepping into the world of touring musicians was a real eye-opener. I learned a lot about a whole nother world that I had until that time no realization even existed. So I was in my late teens. And it was at this time that I also discovered that I was a Māori. My father was descendant from Koroneria Te Whatawhiti from Ngāti Tūkorohe. But this had never been mentioned in my growing up. In fact, I grew up surrounded by 7 whānau. Each had their own farms in a community called Te Akatahuna, which, if you know Palmerston North at all, south towards Foxton, there's a rocket. That's Te Akatahuna. And this was the original settling place of my great-grandmother, Marara Koroneria, who married an Englishman, David Rowland, in 1879. And yet none of my aunties, uncles, or cousins ever referred to this aspect of our heritage. In 1977, Jamie and I began farming on his grandfather's farm on Te Matai Road, Palmerston North. For me, I had a fairly sheltered existence on a farm, although my mother will tell me that as a 3-year-old, I would run away across the paddocks to watch the cows being milked. This must have been a sign. So going farming in my own right was another wake-up call. As a young adult in the 1970s, I began to think of farming as a place where you could be self-sufficient. Use no poisons or sprays, treat animals as pets, have only healthy animals, and not treat them with antibiotics or drenches. The reality of farming was a harsh lesson. Animals needed treating, weeds needed spraying. Hours were so long, I can't recall a time when I wasn't in the cowshed or out on the farm. It was basically a nightmare compared to the images of the flowing skirt and the wicker basket and feeding ourselves off the land. Jamie also felt the pressure. We had a milk quota to meet, otherwise we would be financially penalised. We had increased costs each year: animal health, fertiliser, sprays, and in the good old Kiwi way, we thought there had to be a better way. But what was it? 5 years after starting farming this way, we heard about Rudolph Steiner, particularly biodynamics and Waldorf education. You see, in my naive desire to not work so hard on the farm, I thought I'd have a child, thought I'd have a baby. All my problems would disappear. Another wake-up call. So we had a family, we had 3 children pretty quickly. When our eldest was about to turn 5, it seemed like the cruelest thing to do to send him to a 4-walled classroom when on the farm he had pastures and animals, he had life all around him and life experiences. So Rudolph Steiner education it spoke to us and said, well, in Germany, children don't go to school until they're 6. They haven't all turned out to be morons, the Germans. So, it can't be so bad not to send your child to school at 5. So, we had a year that we could, and we found that it actually was the law in New Zealand to send your child to school at 6. So we had a year up our sleeve. And in that time, we met a woman called Sigrid Palmboom, a retired Rudolph Steiner teacher. She offered to come and teach our children, and which she did. And she taught me too. I think I wrote down in my notes, it sounded so profound because it is what it was. So we began to home educate the kids with Sigrid in the rhythmical teachings of Rudolph Steiner. And I guess that the rhythms of all the things that we do in a Steiner school, the Botma gym, the eurythmy, the working with the seasons, it's a beautiful way to bring up children. So this was around 1986, and the local community, I heard through my father, knew that we down on the Weirdo farm were doing something wacky with our children, and we might like a schoolhouse. So the original Whakarongo schoolhouse was labelled to be demolished by the education department, and the community wanted it preserved. So it arrived on our farm on the back of a truck, and we had a schoolhouse, and that's where our kids went to school. So we also had the 2 children of Susie Hawes and Viv Gander, so there's 5 children in the school and 1 teacher for different age groups, which went against really the philosophy of Rudolph Steiner, which said you have 1 teacher per age group, and that teacher follows through. So it was a little bit difficult for Sigrid to actually get acceptance from her peers for what she was doing, but she would always reassure herself for saying that her children walked through the paddocks, past the cows, opened the gate, over fences to get to the schoolhouse to go to school. So it was a different environment for education, and she called it homeopathic education. She would just take little bits of what she knew about Rudolph Steiner education and give it to the children in the best way she could. And I will have a lifelong admiration for her tenacity and wisdom. And she's now passed from this world, and her living legacy in the children she taught fills me with pride every day. So biodynamics actually gave us an example of how we thought, Jamie and I thought we wanted to farm. It talked about healthy soil, healthy animals, healthy food, and also food that people wanted to eat because it wasn't sprayed. The spray-free food was pretty new back in the early 80s, out of Europe, of course. So we went cold turkey biodynamic. And of course, when you're a biodynamic farmer, you make compost. So we would drive around the farm seeking materials to make a compost heap to turn into compost to spread on the farm. It took a number of years for us to almost have an epiphany. When a couple of things happened, we realized that in Europe, where biodynamics was actually Rudolph Steiner came from Europe, their research had been done in the Northern Hemisphere, there were a lot of animals in barns, not outdoors. So the barns had straw they had the resources for compost right on their doorstep. And perhaps actually this was the reason that they made compost to transfer that fertility back out onto the farms that was providing the food for the animals. But we were outdoors all year round, and we started kicking over cow pats, and every cow pat was a mini compost heap. The worms had come up, the biological activity had created every cow pat into soil. That was great. We put the compost spreader away. Didn't make compost again, ever. So, you know, every cow pat becomes a compost heap on the farm. So the other thing that happened in biodynamics was that it put us in touch with a whole lot of incredible people. And I'd just like to mention a few of our peers. Peter Proctor was our first farm advisor. And, you know, Rachel, I'll probably get a bit tearful. If you know me, this happens all the time. Upon Peter's death, Rachel said that he ate our yogurt every day just prior to his death. Very beautiful, yeah. Glenn Atkinson, who saved our emotional and spiritual lives through his horoscopes in times of incredible challenge. Peter Short was a local farmer, our neighbour, also doing biodynamics. It was great to have him close to us. Andreas Welter, who will be at the conference, he came to our farm from Germany looking to become a Kiwi. We were able to assist him in becoming a Kiwi. So he was our first biodynamic gardener. And Dr. Stuart Hill, who actually gave us the plan to move from a conventional farm through biodynamics to become a sustainable farm. So his teachings were incredible, really, and I'm using those today still when working to transform our iwi conventional farm into a sustainable farm, whether that's organic or biodynamic or regenerative. We haven't got there yet, we're still a long way. But of course, what Dr. Hill says, that first thing you can do is become more efficient. So in our situation, instead of drenching all your calves, you just drench the ones that were sick. So you might have one or two a year. We haven't had any that got sick for a number of years now, but earlier on, one or two slipped through the cracks and needed a drench. Very few. I don't want to make that sound as though it's normal, but when you're converting from conventional through to sustainable, it's really handy to have a plan. And the second part of the plan was, instead of drenching that sick animal with a veterinary ivermectin or whatever, you would substitute something that was more organic, such as cider vinegar. So there was the efficiency phase where you'd be more efficient in what you did. The substitution phase where you would substitute something that was certified organic or was allowable in the organic regime. And the final step, which he always said was the hardest thing, and that's when you actually needed support from others outside of you telling you, you go for it, you're on the wrong track, it seems too hard, but it's the right thing to do. He called it redesign. So you look at your farm and you're a dairy farm, but in fact, you might actually be better off being part horticulture or part sheep and beef or housing, or don't just stick to what you think is the only thing you can do with your whenua. Think about redesigning for what is best for your whenua. So the Biodynamic Association's calendar became our most useful tool in the toolbox for giving us information around management through the seasons. So that was Biodynamic came along. But what happened was, so we kept our kids away from school. We kept them at home. So I lost all my young mum friends because they all went off to schools now. I can see it. Yeah, you become part of a school community. As a farming mum, we didn't have any chatting over the fence, talking to the neighbours about how it's going, because we didn't have anything in common anymore. All our neighbours were moving to using urea and sprays. We were moving in completely the opposite direction. So loneliness was tangible at times. And it was on one of these dark days that I had a spiritual visit from my great-grandmother. I know the feeling, I know the place, I know how it was as if it was yesterday. And she offered a hand on my shoulder, and she assured me that what we were doing was good and was right. And my first visit to our marae, her marae, was a Roland family reunion. So a group of us had got together and said, this is ridiculous, guys. We don't know anything about who we are. So we went to our marae, and it's in a place called Kuku, just south of Levin in Oho. So all the whānau that grew up there on the marae, they call themselves the Kuku kids. So the Kuku kids were all in the kitchen cooking for us, you know, Pākehā whānau from up the road. And we were sitting there, we just had our kai, and we were eavesdropping what the Kuku kids were talking about. And they were having an in-depth, quite aggressive conversation about organic agriculture. And I thought, what? And my brothers looked at me. I said, do you hear what they're talking about? I said, yeah, I know. And so they were talking about how sprays were poisoning their kai, mainly because around Kuku it's Levin, so it's horticulture, it's a lot of intensive market gardening. And they were talking about how really the whānau farm, the iwi farm, needs to be looking at being organic. And my brother sort of poked his head around the corner and said, hey, you know, there's someone here who is an organic farmer. So it was quite incredible. I mean, back in those days, you never met anybody talking in the kitchen about organics, but here we were on my marae. Organic was the topic of conversation. So I felt at home pretty quickly, and in the true Māori way, they had been keeping home fires burning for us to come back. So we're back, and everything is wonderful. So not long after our journey into biodynamics, I came across a very charismatic fellow from way up north, Percy Tipini. We were sitting around a boardroom table in Wellington, a central government committee, and he had his agri-quality or shore quality or whatever it was called then hat on, and I had my Māori economic development hat on, as I just won a national award for Māori women in business, and they put me on this board. Yeah, I wrote, you know, they threw me out of gumboots and put me into high-heeled shoes. And I had just got the most amazing memory of my first time flying to Wellington in shoes, getting a taxi to the terrace, getting out and almost getting a fright, a shock at what the sound was. I did not recognize what the noise was. So this was Wellington, 8:30 in the morning. The business people were on their way. We've all seen it, I'm sure. And the noise was the sound of shoes on the pavement. It was loud, completely different to what you hear every morning on a farm. It was a thing. I'd never heard that before. My first experience of going to Wellington. Yeah, so Percy said to me, what do you think of the audit system for organic? Because he was an auditor. And I said, it's really annoying because all that happens is someone comes in and asks you a whole bunch of questions and it's either a tick or a cross. What are you going to do about it? End of story. When actually, both Percy and I, what we wanted to do was to tell our story, why we do some things. And often that why is so relevant to being a sustainable practitioner because it's something that's been done for generations. That's why we do it, not because it's in the standards that that's what you have to do. So it's coincidental that it is in the standards, but why we get up every day is because we're part of a story that is multi-generational. And so Percy just nodded. He said exactly. And he set about developing a verification system, hua parikore. And he was able to attract some pretty incredible people to help him on that journey. And they're still with us today. And you would have heard, I believe, Dr. Jessica Hutchings and Pounamu Skelton this morning, all proteges of Percy Tipene, Greta Carney from Hapi in the Hawke's Bay, Lionel and Hiniamaru from Papatuanuku Kokiri Marae, Geneva Hildreth, many a kōrero her and Percy had on their front porch, just talking about and formulating what is today hua parikore. So the pillars of Te Waka Kai Order and hua parikore stand strong in the past and in the future. You know, they have the holistic in their attention to the detail of life-giving, life-forming, wellness of spirit and of the physical, as is biodynamics. And biodynamics, we as a people stand as a conduit of the energy manifested in the cosmos and transferred to all living things around us. And in hua parikore, he tangata, we stand on Papatuanuku with arms stretched to Ranginui, receiving all that is Māori, Wairua, Tinana. So that's where I'm going to start at the Biodynamic Conference. How we at BioFarm have intertwined, they're synonymous, and really it comes down to, doesn't it, Indigenous knowledge that comes from the past and we take it into the future. Nō reira, thank you for listening. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Thank you so much, Cathy. I'm just feel like I could burst into tears. And to me, both biodynamics and hua parikore, just the richness of the stories and being so heart-led and steeped in ancestry and history and connection with the land, it all comes forth. I'm I'm wondering if anyone here listening has questions that they'd like to put to Cathy. This feels like such a treat to have this as a recording, but if there's more that people would like to hear, well, I mean, you can come to the conference, shake her hand in person. Yeah. Sol has his hand up. Oh, Cathy, are you okay to answer questions? I should have asked you.
Yep. Kia ora, Sol.
Kia ora, Cathy. Hey, being a soil guy, I'm really curious to know what you do, yeah, or not do as well with your soil to keep it healthy.
Well, you really would love to talk to our ecologist, Jamie. What we don't do, we don't crop. So we've got pastures that are 60 years old. We do not work to residuals. So we fully feed our cows what they need to be sustained. I guess right at the beginning, we used to put on 500. That was part of the learning of the becoming connected with your inputs about what you do on the farm, bringing that energy into and then bringing it out of. When Jamie hurt his back, couldn't move for 3 months, we thought, oh, if we can't spray 500, does that mean we're not biodynamic? So we had a big mechanical stirrer, and the spraying of the 500 was a big deal. So when he got back on his feet, we didn't spray 500 anymore. We did a little bit of a dabble with cosmic pipe. That was, have you heard of that?
No.
Oh, brother. There's a whole different tangent. We got a cosmic, I don't know how long I've got, it's a big story, that cosmic pipe thing. And it's about radionics and radiating the energy of the 501 or whatever or 500, whatever you put in it. And that's another worldview. But tangible in that we had just erected the cosmic pipe, and we got a call from a woman from Christchurch who was in Whanganui asking where we were. She knew that she was close by because she could read and track these energies. She finally got to our farm, pinpointed on the map where we had the pipe, but where we should have it for better emissions. So that, going back to soil, so there's no plugging. I think we've got 650 acres, 200 and something hectares. We're milking 75 cows. Wow. That's they're all giving 25 to 30 litres each, which is enough for our yogurt processing plant. We have 300 Drysdale sheep, 500 meat goats, rear all our stock on farm. All our stock are born on farm. So I suppose for soil health, it's all intertwined, isn't it? So the animals give back. So we don't fertilize. Every 3 years we soil test. We will apply lime, boron if required. So I don't know if that answers your question, but we don't do anything. So anything that the conventional farmer does, we don't do it. So there's no urea. So the fertility comes from the animals. So it's a closed system. Yeah, you have to come and have a look yourself.
Love to.
Cathy, there's another question here from Lou. How do we encourage more people to farm like you?
Well, if I knew the answer to that, Lou, you know, a whole lot of people would be. It's the same question as how do you encourage people to eat BioFarm yogurt and not the collective? It's you can't throw money at it. And in fact, I think the only thing you can do is that whole look after your own backyard thing. Because, you know, all of you here, I haven't met any of you in person, but you all know about us. So you're all doing it. And I think that's all you can do. You can just do it yourself, the best you can, and that over time will spread out. Yeah.
Thank you. So, if we change tack a little bit, I'll speak on behalf of the Biodynamic Association Council. I came onto council, I think it was 2019, 2020, and one of my fellow council members, Christine Magini, is here on the call. And we're pretty casual here. So Christine, if you want to unmute and chime in at any moment, just have a think about what you could say with Bryony not being able to be here today, particularly with regards to the conference working group and how that's coming together. And you've organised some of the events at the conference that I know you'd probably like a few minutes. So I would like to read out a verse that Rudolph Steiner gave that for me speaks to my picture of the Biodynamic Association. And he said, the healthy social life is found when in the mirror of each human soul, the whole community finds its reflection. And when in the community, the virtue of each one is living. So I came across biodynamics through my children going to the Waldorf school in Titirangi, and I joined a reading group to learn more about anthroposophy and understand this weird education system. And the reading group was hosted by Peter Bollen, who is a Dutch man. His wife, Neeltje Bollen, is an art therapist, and their home was just beautiful. The garden was gorgeous. They used biodynamics, and every now and then they would host a stir, and people in the reading group and their friends and their neighbors and different people would come and stir. And I grew up with a father who worked on a research farm, and I'd been around farm animals and I was used to the smell, but there was no way I was sticking my hand in that bucket of cow manure. That I found the whole concept just bizarre. But I watched the documentary by Peter Proctor, One Man, One Cow, One Planet, and I could sort of grasp intellectually that this was really important. And so I went to the stairs and I spread the thing, and then I met Liz Ellington and started using the compost preparations. And I think it was actually when Liz passed away that I lost my source of preparations in Auckland. And I could see how magical they were. And it was like, okay, I'm going to have to join the association. And it was a scary time for me, because when I looked at the Biodynamic Association, you were all farmers like Cathy and the winemakers and the cheese makers. And there's this big business. And here am I, a home gardener in West Auckland, not really all that confident. And so with this verse by Rudolph Steiner, I really feel that the more open and inviting, welcoming and accessible we can be, the easier it is for people to find their place within the biodynamic community, because there's space for everyone. And so the theme for this year's conference is Biodynamics and You, and we really I think that the intention was to find the commonalities, biodynamics and permaculture. There's so many overlaps, so many people who love both these modalities. Help me out here, Christine. We've got Gary Williams coming in to talk about water. We've got people talking about homeopathy, and baked into our strategy for the next 3 years is this deep desire to find a way of biodynamics being unique in New Zealand, and that means working with and studying Indigenous approaches to agriculture, whether it's huapara kore or just doing some treaty work as an organisation, learning te reo and grappling with our own place in this land. And so this year's conference is going to be so many people interested in all these different ways of working with the land. And my hope is that we come out of it with this networks and connections and ways of working into the future. So next year, 2024, is the 100-year anniversary of biodynamics globally. Some people say that it's the original form of Western organics, and if you track the history, you can find that what we call organics was inspired by a lot of the work happening in biodynamics at the time. They just kind of erased the spiritual side and made it simplistic. Having said that, of course, the Indigenous approaches to agriculture around the world have always been organic. But biodynamics certainly wasn't the first. But for the 100-year anniversary next year, I think it's a chance to kind of use the biodynamic principles to just say, we can do this more, we can have more of it, we can have biodynamics in schools, biodynamics in workplaces, biodynamics in cities. I'm using biodynamics to plant a pollinator garden along the railway line and saying no more glyphosate, that nobody will ever plant a farm or a garden there, but knowing that those bees are coming to flowers that season by season are cleaner and cleaner and more healthy. If we did that in enough neglected little patches of land around New Zealand, then our honey exports would over time have less glyphosate in them. What else do I want to say? Christine, would you like to hop in and talk about the conference?
Sure. Thanks, Katrina. Kia ora, everybody. Thank you, Cathy, for that beautiful story. Wow, that was so touching and so wonderful to hear. Because, yeah, this collaboration theme that we've got this year, the intention, as Katrina said, was to really honour and acknowledge that, you know, what we all loosely call or collectively call organics is a real mixture, a real biodiversity in itself. And and most of us who've come to biodynamics or use biodynamics use the preparations, and it doesn't matter what system we follow. It doesn't matter how many we combine. It doesn't matter whether you're pure or whether you're not, unless perhaps you're going for Demeter certification. And certainly from my perspective, the huapara kore acknowledgement that there is the spiritual forming capacity, life forces, beings, if we can say that are just as important as the terrestrial earthly life forces that are very much being promoted and looked at. And then in between, in this atmosphere that we live in, whether I don't understand the Maori terminology fully, so I may be using this wrongly, but the wairua, this sense of connecting everything, the seen and the unseen, very much for me lives in biodynamics and is what has prompted this step forward. I guess in layers. It's like you were saying before, you deepen, you explore, you try, some things work, you like this bit, you like that bit. But like all of us, we're all bits and pieces that make up an individuality. And that there's no claim on who first came up with agriculture. You know, we can go back thousands of years, like Noel tried to give a bit of a picture, and all human beings have been involved positively or negatively in that journey. And so in putting this conference together, we tried as much as we could to bring together what perhaps from Our picture of New Zealand are the main focuses of organic or, regenerative agriculture. So we've got Gary Williams working with water, because we are a small collection of islands surrounded by a massive amount of water, and we've recently had some major water events, and this whole managing and understanding and working with water, is very topical and important. And he has a permaculture background and a biodynamic background and a scientific background. We have Dieter Provost, who's he's been a Demeter certifying, I don't know what they call them, inspector for many years. He's also permaculture based, and he had apple orchards in the top of the South Island for many years, and has a wealth of knowledge of, as his talk says, combining permaculture and biodynamics, not one without the other. We have the lovely Caitlin Lamb, who through Katrina's influence, young 19, 20-year-old, has really got excited and stepped up on behalf of young people to encourage people to make composts and recycle food wastes and really look at growing food. We have Peter Backus, now in his 80s, so many people would know, you mentioned Peter Proctor. Well, he and Peter Backus, are some of the older guard. There are others, but he's going to be speaking about the connection of homeopathy, which ties in a bit to a certain extent with Glenn Atkinson's work with his, what does he call them? Gosh, sorry, Glenn. I'll try and remember the name of his products. Anyway, and Andrew Criglington, who's another homeopath, also on the BD Council. So they'll be looking at that, because the preparations are often talked about as being homeopathic remedies or homeopathic support systems, I suppose, for the soil. And then through another biodynamic practitioner, farmer who I knew in Australia, where I lived for a long time, we've invited Charlie Arnott, who has amazing regenerative agriculture podcasts that he's been doing for several years in Australia, interviewing a lot of the regenerative farmers, growers, activists, and fascinating people around Australia. He and Hamish Mackay are currently, or have been for a few years now, travelling around Australia, running biodynamic workshops and showing farmers who want to convert from so-called conventional farming how to use biodynamics and regenerative practices, because it's about water and biodiversity, etc. as well. So Charlie will be talking from the podcast sort of viewpoint, some stories on a Saturday afternoon. He'll also be talking on Sunday morning more about his journey converting his family farm from conventional farming to biodynamics, and how that journey has gone, and what's worked and what hasn't, and what he's seeing in the broader landscape in Australia there. So, sorry, phone ringing. And then we have Monique McFarlane, who was on council. She's a young woman who's doing some lovely workshops and encouraging people to use the biodynamic preparations on her parents' farm down in Waihi. So she will talk about some of the unseen realms, this connection that younger people are now not so scared to talk about, in terms of this wairua, this connection with the unseen, the working with the elemental beings, the working with the planets, the moon, the starry realms, and perhaps even the zodiac. And then we have the lovely Cathy Tait-Jamieson sharing her story of a little bit, this wonderful taster that we've had here over many years. So, and then after that, there'll be open discussions, where are we going? What are we doing? How are we going to sort of try and connect through the organic sectors to build a bigger presence, to stand, I'm going to say it, against what is really being imposed from the current government picture. So, yeah, the intention is to keep strengthening these relationships and not be so many little small pods all trying to do the same thing, but that we really, you know, try and find ways to work together a whole lot more. So that's my take on why we're doing this conference. Love to see anyone who'd like to come along and partake in that. So thank you.
And we'll also have the AGM during that weekend. So I'll be stepping off council. We'll have new people coming onto the council, and it's always this kind of moment of renewal when new people come in, right, we're going to go this direction. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that. And then the day before the conference, which is Friday the 19th, Joanne Turner, who she and Greg have been involved in the council for a long time. She holds the Demeter certification for New Zealand and is chair of the council. I'll be staying at her farm for the week, and we are building compost. We're making the CPP cowpat pit preparation and doing a 500 stir. So Rachel Pomeroy will be staying, and Rachel and I, together with Joanne and Greg, will host this wonderful day where people who are maybe new to using the preparations can get their hands in and do it. And my intention is that once you've done it once, you can then do it independently and start teaching. There is no need to practice in isolation for 10 years before taking it into a workplace or a community space or a school. Yeah, what's happening in the chat here? Okay, Alison, did you have a particular question about biodynamic wine? I don't think we have a biodynamic winemaker here in the room. But as Cathy said, Andreas Welter will be at the conference. And yeah, the biodynamic conference is often, dare I say it, dominated by the winemaking crowd. That there will be a stack of them there. That
I think it really is the flagship of biodynamics mainstream in New Zealand. I think we can be very proud of that. Awesome. Yeah, it just shows that it works.
Yeah.
You can actually
Yeah.
so, yeah.
I add, I'd be interested in some statistics for biodynamic wine as opposed to just organic wine.
I can answer that for you, Alison. Coming out of Dornach in Switzerland, there's a group of young biodynamic practitioners who are saying, we need more research, we need more research, we need the evidence. And so if you go to the section of agriculture at the Goetheanum in Switzerland, there's a new page where they've employed someone, they've allocated a budget to upload all the research globally as it comes through. So I would go take a look at that. Do you want me to go find the link and I can drop it in here before we finish?
Yeah, that would be really great. Can I make the comment from my knowledge that one particular recent year, France has a lot of wine competitions every year and several different types. And one particular recent year, a biodynamic red won one of the top prizes. So we know internationally that biodynamic wine is very important. And I've heard the comment that biodynamic wine, as opposed to just organic wine, preserves the local terroir better. In other words, it better reflects the land that it comes from. So it's pretty unique in that. And I think this is becoming more and more acknowledged. I happened to see a BioGrow map the other day of BioGrow wine wine certified in New Zealand. And I was surprised to see that something like 49% of the wines in Marlborough are BioGrow certified. And I thought that Otago was the centre for red wine particularly, but it's only about 25% there. So there is a real success story as far as I've been able to ascertain concerning biodynamic wine, both in New Zealand and globally. So your comments.
Kia ora, everybody. I need to leave. It's time to get some cows in for milking. So I look forward to seeing you all at the BD conference.
Bye, Cathy.
Thank you, Cathy. Thank you so much for sharing your story. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you. Ka kite.
I could maybe respond to Alison's question a little bit. There is the Organic and Biodynamic Wine Conference coming up in June soon, and they may well have a lot more research there that they could offer. There is an Australian winemaker, Vanya, somebody, in Western Australia in Perth, and she's done a huge amount of research on the difference between so-called, normal wine and then organic wine and biodynamic wine. I will try and remember what her surname is, but if you just Googled Vanya Winery, Perth, or Western Australia, I think she will come up. She's very highly respected, and yeah, she started as a scientist and set out to actually disprove that there was any difference, and then, like tends to happen, became totally converted and now speaks about all of this. So yeah, maybe look that up, Alison. I'm sorry, I can't remember her surname now in a moment. Yeah.
Thanks, Christine. Does anyone else have any questions? I see Lou. Are we recording the sessions at the conference? Christine?
That might be a technical question. That's okay.
Hopefully we are. Yeah, because Brian is not well at the moment. We're just we're waiting for some confirmation there about that. And Charliana will be interviewing some of the participants and some of the speakers. So there's a yes with fingers crossed that then will be available on the website for purchase for those that either attended the conference or didn't. Yeah, so
We have
hoping that's going to go ahead.
We have a marvelous person who does the marketing for the Biodynamic Association. It's Laura Hatt, and she is so good at capturing recordings, getting them up on the website. She's super efficient, and so if there is a recording, she'll be getting up there to help us make a little bit more money afterwards, I'm sure.
And one more question: if somebody would like to know more about the basics of biodynamics, where would we send them? Is there a website, or is there a course, or is there anything that Biodynamic NZ offer?
So many different places. On the Biodynamic Association website, I think there is a recording where Monique McFarlane and I both answered some frequently asked questions, and that's now available there to purchase. There's people all through the country who run workshops. It's one of the strategic goals to strengthen the regional groups. So I would direct people either to Laura, who does the marketing, so social media, or the emails that we send out, or to Bryony and say, who's practicing biodynamics in my area? Because they've got the membership list and they can send people. As a council member, I always feel really awkward promoting my own business, but if you Google Blue Borage, I do a heap of stuff. Once I step off council, I'll be speaking up more and more. But Monique also offers courses. Christine up in Mangawhai, and you travel as well. You've taken biodynamics to China. There's a lovely group up there. So if you can get in touch with Christine and say, "Can you help us out?"
Thank you.
And also, once people join become a member, and you can do just a digital membership as well as a full membership, you get some little booklets that give you a really lovely overview, and hopefully simple. We're trying to simplify it and upgrade them a little bit more. So you do get some information. And then there's the cultivating conversations once a month on a Thursday evening. So I've recently been doing those. Perhaps somebody else will take that on. And we try and answer questions from members, at the moment. You have to be a member to come on board that. We're looking at whether we want to change that or not. Yeah, so there's a few things around there.
Would you agree with me, Christine, that sometimes the best way of learning is to find someone who's using it regularly and just go along and do it with them? So that might be a school, it might be a workplace. I'm meeting more workplaces who are open to using the biodynamic preparations, which is really exciting. Fingers crossed I can get the Waikato District Council on board with turning my newest teaching venue into a spray-free model site for property maintenance professionals to come and learn biodynamic techniques for reducing harmful sprays. Now Susie's popped a comment in the chat who actually teaches biodynamic. So the course by John Ridout, I think that was the Taruna course, is that right, Christine?
Yeah, that sadly finished when John died a few years ago. There is work in progress underway to get something else up going forward, because we've had to spend so much time sort of pulling apart the Biodynamic Association and seeing what's relevant and what isn't and new ways forward. Then that's what we've been focusing on. But there's always interest in courses, and so it's in the pipeline. There's a lot of really, really good courses online through Biodynamics in the USA, in the UK, if you speak Spanish, in Brazil or Europe. As Katrina said, there's a lot more information coming out through the section for agriculture through the Goetheanum. There's books that you can borrow from the Biodynamics Association libraries. Yeah, so I think, yeah, there's actually a fantastic video. It's a YouTube video, and I think it might be on the BDNZ YouTube site by Lynette West, who I did my biodynamic training with. She was actually a New Zealand biodynamic practitioner. I did her course in Australia. She lived there for many years. And talking of King Charles, she went to Highgate and taught him and his manager about biodynamics a few years before she actually died, which sadly was in 2008. That course is brilliant, and I'm in contact with her children, sort of trying to look at ways we could get some funding to really get that out again, because it's brilliant. So but there's a wonderful YouTube, it's called Elysium Gardens in the UK, where she goes through a pretty good solid overview of using the preparations, why you use them, star law, connecting with the biodynamic calendar, making cow pits, putting down 500, doing the 501. So, you know, it's that I would recommend people to go to. So Lynette West, I think it's Elysium Gardens. It was set up with private funding, and I'm pretty sure it's still existing today. So yeah, maybe have a look at that.
Great. Thank you, Christine. We're going to probably roll into our next section now. So I kind of feel like it's our last session for the day, but we can just keep chatting if you want, rather than just turning everyone off and putting them into the waiting room if everyone's happy to do that. I actually had one more question, which was, are you seeing an influx of younger people come into the biodynamics? Like, how is it? Because we keep hearing about all these legends that are passing away. Like, how are you attracting more younger people like Caitlin into biodynamics?
Caitlin basically didn't have a choice. So
I think an answer to that from my perspective, you know, I'm up in Mangawhai in Northland, and so over the last, well, 10 years I've been up here. Pauline Mann and I do workshops once a year. We make cow pit 500, put the horns down. It's come and gone. We were up to about 40 people coming to things before COVID, and then of course everything sort of went sideways. And so what we're finding up here, because a lot more people, mostly younger but middle-aged and some even older, are moving to lifestyle blocks and sort of looking to grow their own food, then there's a lot more younger people coming along. I have a community garden up here that's based on organic and biodynamic growing methods at a friend's property. There's 5 families who we get together on a Monday, and initially it was a sort of teaching garden, and now everybody's got a lot more confidence to sort of start growing. And we've made compost, and we've put out cowpat pit, and we've also put out 500. We will do a workshop making the 501 some stage this year, and so I just put things up on Facebook. I've got past my nana fear of, you know, social media. Even though I make lots of stuff up there, as Katrina knows, I'm usually help. And I'm finding that there's quite a lot more people just ringing, and we have regional reps who are, their names are on the website, that people in the different areas can contact them. And as Katrina said, the focus is to really strengthen those regional areas, and like with the Huaparakore, you know, one step at a time, one seed at a time. There's a whole combination of ways that younger people are finding their way to us. So
can I just add also that globally there's a lot of young people coming into biodynamics. So it was 2020 when we were in lockdown, and the Biodynamic Conference was scheduled to happen in Switzerland, and they had to do it online. And so head office of anthroposophy in Switzerland, they don't do stuff online, that they partnered with the youth section. And it was a brilliant partnership, because these young people were just given a budget to get the cameras and the mics and do it. And they had a proper sort of like TV set up. And going into the Zoom rooms, they had the speakers presenting to a camera, and behind them you could see the full auditorium. I don't know how many people it seats, Christine, 1,000? It's a big space that they managed to create the atmosphere of an authentic anthroposophical conference completely digitally. So within the anthroposophical movement, the young people, you know, they've said, hey, we need a research platform. We need this research, and they've created it. They've built it. Another example of a young sort of superstar would be Arizona Muse, a successful fashion model who, through sustainable fashion, now wants to make sure that there's a future for biodynamic fiber, cotton, linen, wool, and we need biodynamic farms for fiber, not just food. Another example is a teacher in America, Stuart Lundy, and his partner, Natalie McGill. Now, they're first generation farmers. They're both like academic philosophers and poets. Like, they're just, the brain power between these two is phenomenal. And when young people see these other young people leading biodynamics, it creates that space for the high school students to get involved. Yeah, it's just gorgeous. One of my latest courses is family friendly biodynamics, and stirring with children and seeing them spread it out and get excited about the worms and studying the sort of forms of different flowers is just gorgeous. So I did a CPP stir with my 1-year-old granddaughter this year. I'm not sure if the purists would approve, but she wanted to get her hands in that bucket of water. Yeah.
Nice.
And one last thing also, because in Steiner schools, gardening is always taught as part of the curriculum. Like in class 3, there's a farmer main lesson, and so everybody goes to farms, looks at, you know, what happens there, and then there are always gardens biodynamically grown at pretty much every school, even if it's just a few pots and things like that. And I think, you know, even if it's not a conscious awareness, as children get older, at some point that thing of wanting to just grow something comes back, and they've had that experience that's living in them as a kind of, you know, conscious or unconscious memory. So yeah, it's not just biodynamics. I mean, it's great to see the, you know, what is it, food to table, growing to table, garden to table, you know, things that so many different people are doing. I think, yeah, there's heaps of wonderful possibilities, that people are going, there's a lack, or there's a need, whichever way we want to look at it. What can we do to sort of meet that and bridge that? So, like all the other speakers have said today, it's about what can we do? How can we step forward? How can we step up? And even just starting to grow a few herbs in a few pots. That's already changing the environment that you live in. It's changing yourself. Yes, amazing support comes. So
this is one of the things missing at the moment in the conventional education system. Is it's just food's not part of the curriculum anymore, is it? I mean, a lot of schools have gardens, and if you're lucky enough, your school is an enviro school and they push it a bit more, but the majority of schools don't have it in their curriculum. It's so important.
Yeah, it's a real opportunity. Let's call it that.
And another interesting factor is because Steiner went into nutrition, as he did with everything else. And there is a wonderful woman who's, well, apart from Jill Backus, she's put out some great books around food and nutrition. Highly recommend those. But there's another lady who I know went around the Steiner school that my daughter went to in Michael Park. And she basically sort of stands up in front of people and says, how many people eat potatoes, tomatoes, capsicum, eggplants? Everybody puts their hands up. She said, they're all deadly like nightshade family. Think about what that's doing to your system, and you just kind of see everybody go, oh my God, and then she introduces the balance of the grains, the different plant foods, whether you eat meat or fish or not, but, builds this wonderful picture about the balance of food, that it's once again, we've sort of got into almost this monoculture. Fast food, takeaway, pizzas, McDonald's, da-da-da-da-da. Like Jessica said this morning, going to this, what did she call it? The food desert, where there was fried chicken and something else, hamburgers or something, or chips or whatever it was. How amazing in 2023 that's all that's on offer, when you think about where we've all come from consciously over time. So yeah, there's lots of little steps and little things that can happen. Even, you replace one thing in your normal weekly shopping list that perhaps is different, and have a go at eating a little bit differently. That will impact. And there was also a wonderful woman in Australia who went to the jail in Goulburn, just down the road, or not far from where I lived. And so she went in and she got funding to set up gardens for, it wasn't a maximum security, it was for those prisoners who were ready to head out into the world again. Started growing food, then managed with little plastic knives and forks in the kitchen to show people how to cook food. And they noticed it was a phenomenal amount. It was like 75% decrease in violence and, contentious interactions in the prison in that year of her pilot program. So, what we eat affects us enormously. And that was wonderful. Once again, I'm sorry, I can't remember her name, but there is a book out there. And she continued that work for 3 years with wonderful results. So
I think we're at time, right?
Yeah, we're just thanks so much, Christine, for jumping in and chatting about everything biodynamic, and for Katrina as well. Really appreciate your time. We're going to jump straight